Good morning. We are live this Thursday morning. As you can tell, I am not Sue. It says Sue up there, but I'm not Sue. Sue and I switched this week as we do sometimes. So I'm here with you on Thursday with the Inside Scoop with Sue, and she was with you on Tuesday with Tuesdays with Kamira. Today, we're going to talk about teen addiction. We're going to talk about it with Dr. Henry McCurtis. Thank you for joining us, Dr. McCurtis.
Thank you for the invitation.
Before we get started, just a couple of things. One is to remind you that we are here live on Thursday morning at 10:30 Eastern. And if you're watching us live, please place a comment or question in the comment section, and Dr. McCurtis will address those live on air. If you are watching a replay, he won't be available to do that, but you should still comment because other people watch replays and you can dialogue with one another. Now, let's begin. Dr. McCurtis, this is a serious topic, so we want to give it its due time. Let's begin with you telling us a little bit about yourself and your work, please.
Well, I'm a psychiatrist and with a special interest in psychoanalysis and addiction medicine. I'm especially interested in the developmental perspective, how a person becomes a person. And consequently, the early years, first 10 years, second 10 years of a person's life are critical in that process, which is a mystery to us all still. But that's been my interest throughout my career. And I've been back here in this room since 1978.
So those of us who
understand that question, how a person becomes a person.
How a person becomes a person. Those of us who are watching, we're all in some capacity raising tweens and teens. So we're watching it up front, and it is fascinating, the development and the different stages and the things that can affect either from the outside or from your inner circle. And one of those things is addiction. Can you define addiction for us so that we're all talking about the same thing for this next half hour?
Well, addiction is a compulsive behavior. One is driven by a compulsion to seek a pleasure. And it gets to the point that one does not have a choice but to pursue that particular object of pleasure. That's when it becomes an addiction. It can be initially, there's a whole spectrum of uses and misuses, but you have choice. When you lose choice, that's addiction.
I like that. When you lose choice, what are the signs of addiction from the outside, from somebody who's looking at a person who may be an addict of some type?
Well, one of the best signs is that anybody can use, and you just think about it. We call it the cage questions. 4 questions. Cage. Has the person tried to cut down? Do they get annoyed when people tell them that they're using or drinking or doing too much? Do they feel guilty and start to conceal what they're doing? And do they have, when it's a substance, have to get up in the morning and use? We call it an eye opener. That's the E.
I love that. Cage. Cut down.
Cage. C-A-G-E.
Cut down.
You have one of those positive, the chances that you have a problem with use.
Okay. So if you're doing one of these things, trying to cut down and can't, you get annoyed when it's pointed out, you feel guilty about it, or you are compelled to have an eye opener to use whatever it is first thing.
Mm-hmm.
One of those things.
You get up in the morning, you got to have a cigarette.
Mm-hmm.
You get up in the morning, you got to have a joint.
Mm-hmm.
You get up in the morning, you got to drink.
Mm-hmm. So why do some people become addicted and others don't? Some people do those things.
Great mystery. How a person becomes a person is a blend between nature and nurture,
Mm-hmm.
genes and environment.
Mm-hmm.
And that is the central research question that dominates the field of addiction today.
Mm-hmm.
Why do some become addicted and others don't?
Mm-hmm.
My own clinical perspective is that it has to do with certain ego functions, strength of certain ego functions, affect regulation, frustration tolerance, and impulse control. These are ego functions that we have, and they are determined by our Constitution and, of course, the challenges that we are confronted with in our environment. If your frustration tolerance is low, chances are you will select out something in the environment to soothe you. Seeking to self-soothe is just a natural inclination. We try to get away from pain. We try to get away from things that are noxious.
Mm-hmm.
The baby sucks the thumb. When it learns to suck the thumb, when the breast is not available. Soothing. We learn to soothe. And so that inclination, if our frustration, if we can't delay frustration, and it's in the environment, the chances are we are more vulnerable to something that is soothing.
Now we're here, the people who are watching here are adults who are raising teens. What is the connection between teen addiction and possibly mental health, or an impetus for them to start? Because they're fresh, right? They're anywhere from 12 to 19.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Well, we all know, we all have learned and we've heard that the teenager's brain is still forming. First 10 years of our lives, you know, I tell you, we are learning and our brains are forming circuits and laying down networks. And we're learning a lot. And we're learning it under the gaze of our parents and significant parental authorities. They provide us with the reward. It's that we're seeking to keep their smile from turning to a frown.
Mhm.
And so we're balancing. That's why we are so susceptible to the rules, demands, limits, expectations, because that reward is there in the gaze.
Mhm.
Now, all of this is happening at the time that we're trying to achieve autonomy. You know, the terrible twos. Why do we call it that? It's because that child has learned that it can explore on its own, begin to take initiative and learn things, and that curiosity is there.
Mhm.
And man alive, it is taking things in. And we have to stop. Don't do that. That's when no is first heard. That's when frustration first enters. No, don't stop. And sometimes you'll even see a child cry when you stop that exploratory surge? Well, that push for autonomy continues. And then in adolescence, it takes on another surge. The brain is developing. It's developing. But during that early phase, we as human beings, we're egocentric primarily. It's about us.
Yeah.
And that gaze tells us when we are going to be gratified or frustrated. But it's about us. Push for autonomy in an egocentric manner. Now, when we enter adolescence, with that brain, no experience, all of our experiences are determining brain development. By the time we get to adolescence, we have a strong desire for autonomy. Strong desire for autonomy. And the gaze of the parent becomes less important than the gaze of our peers. Now there's where the big conflict occurs. That's when the tension between parent and children occur. We don't have the judgment. We don't have the capacity for consequential thinking and decision making, but yet we have a powerful desire to do what we want to do. Therein lies the risk. Now, temperament comes in. As I mentioned earlier, our nature, nurture, our constitution determines how well we regulate affect. Some people have a temperament that is prone to be anxious and to be able to handle a lot of stimulus. And so you might be shy, you might be a little avoidant, you might be the kid who, is quiet. You don't like a lot of stimulation. Some kids want to be up in the mix and they are risk takers. So you get roughly two temperaments, just for the sake of conversation. Enter adolescence. You've got the anxious, avoidant temperament, and you've got the risk-taking temperament. And you've got the need for the gaze of the peers. I go to a party and I'm shy. I discover that if I drink, I loosen up. Now, my anxiety I found something for my anxiety. I found something for my shyness. And that sets up a problem. I find something to soothe me. Or I'm a risk taker. I want excitement. I go and somebody pulls out a joint or somebody is drinking and smoking. I'm here again. And I want to be able to hold my liquor. The more I do, the more my creds are. That opens up another problem. Because my judgment, my consequential thinking is not there. I don't have the experience. This is why I mentioned that we are totally dependent on the gaze of our parents in the first 10 years. And they have us then, though we are pushing for autonomy and initiative and to develop competence. But now we know, and they're the commander. They're the commander. But then we need them to shift in that second decade. We need them to become coach because it's our playbook, the sport we choose. the instrument that we want to play, the friends we want to have, these things, we want to make these choices.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the parents' job to coach and to help us, because we don't have the experience, and we don't have the resources.
Mm-hmm.
Another aspect. The second half of that second decade, 15, say, into 20, or now maybe 18 into 24, we need a counselor, because we are making decisions, but we don't have the experience. So we need somebody to help us to do consequential thinking, to help us to identify our choices. And that's the role of a parent. The problem often comes, and the mental health problems emerge, is when the confluence of our constitution, our anxiety, that might have now morphed into depression because of certain other failures that we've encountered, or our risk-taking behavior that may have gotten us into conduct problems or other risk-taking mishaps. These things, these come in and begin to get us labeled, diagnosed, anxiety disorder, depression. And now you superimpose that on top of addiction. And it's the addiction, or the drug misuse, I should say, because at that point, it's usually misuse. That's where the mental health component comes, but the drug misuse is on top of a brain that is not matured. And once you begin to hijack your pleasure circuits with substances, you create a problem in an immature brain that may have great difficulty repairing. And that's why it's so critical for prevention in adolescence.
Mm-hmm.
Alcohol, nicotine, marijuana, those are the three that, and I say those three primarily because one of the critical factors of addiction is denial, minimization, rationalization. Why are those three so dangerous? Because they're legal. We have decided to legalize them, and that reinforces our denial of how dangerous they are. But nicotine kills more people. Alcohol kills more people than heroin or cocaine.
Mm-hmm.
And yet, pack of cigarettes is right over there. Cabinet is full of liquor. Denial. And so the adolescent is more susceptible, because the adolescent is already, that's one of the main defenses, is denial.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing's gonna happen to me. You know?
I'm a superhero.
Yeah. I can do that. That ain't nothing. I don't know why you're worried about that.
Yeah.
Well, there you go.
Yeah.
So it's a beautiful but perilous period. And it is fraught with risk and wonder. And it's a passage, and substances, when that pleasure center is hijacked. That is one of the major ways to derail development. And we're most susceptible during that adolescent period of that hijacking and derailment. Now, you think about it. What are the tasks for that second generation, that second decade? To develop a personal identity, to be able to cultivate some idea about a professional identity, in order that when we move into the third decade, we can begin to arm ourselves with the knowledge, skill, talent to solidify the professional identity and to do the work of intimacy. If you're not prepared, if you're derailed in that second decade, problems are going to abound because you're thrown behind in the third decade. And you can see it. You can see, I saw a man yesterday. He's going on 50. And his problem was social anxiety. When it wasn't even recognized, and he suffered with it all of his life. And it stuck him in adolescence. He's pushed, through perseverance, he has found his strengths, and he has cultivated a path that he can feel hopeful about facing challenges in the future. But it came at a cost. Came at a cost.
I have a question. We use the term addict and addicted to a lot these days, especially with our kids. We use it in terms of behavior. We say they're addicted to social media or cell phones or video games.
Oh,
Is that a correct usage of the term? And will it affect the developing brain the same way that a substance does?
well, now I'm glad you asked that, because that circuit, that reward circuit that governs our behavior and our pursuit of pleasure that button can be pushed by a number of things. Usually we think of food and sex because those are the things that are critical for our survival. Those things push that button. But remember, I said the gaze. The gaze is the first source of pushing that button. That affirming, encouraging, applauding, approving gaze is the first thing that pushes that button. What do we have on social media? Likes.
Yes.
Likes. We seek compulsively to acquire likes.
Yep.
And that pushes that button. That's a reward. And so I'm buried in my phone all times of the night on TikTok, this, that, and the other, looking for likes. Pushing that button. It's in the same circuitry between the dopamine pathway in the limbic system. Same circuitry. And so social media is a critical component of that. And I see it all the time. I see it all the time. I have families where there are huge fights about screen time. And we're learning. And during the pandemic, with the isolation,
Yes.
I mean, and we had to use screen time for education, but some of the kids were on there doing, they would
other things. Well, now, how can we support our teens if we've identified that using your cage questions, if there is an issue, there seems to be an issue? How do we support them?
Well, honesty is the first thing.
Mhm.
Courage, honesty, and conveying a sense of, I may sound philosophical here, but faith and hope
Mhm.
and integrity.
Mhm.
I'm not going to sit at the dinner table and be on my phone.
Mhm.
If I'm going to take yours and cut the Wi-Fi off, at night,
Mhm.
I'm not going to slip and find a hot spot where I can.
We've never done any of those things.
You see what I'm saying? So,
Mhm.
honesty,
Mhm.
and I say honesty not lightly, because it is honesty that is behind the problem of addiction.
Mhm.
Uh, None of us like to feel powerless. None of us like to feel out of control, that we have lost our capacity to choose.
Mhm.
As I said, the major push of that terrible two is for autonomy and control. That begins then, and it continues. And now to tell me that I'm not in control, I will deny until the cows come home that I got this. I can quit when I want to.
Mhm.
I don't have a problem. And I don't care if you're 75 or if you're 25 or if you are 15. That desire to avoid being confronted with powerlessness.
Mhm.
And so, honesty, you can't stop. I've seen young people fight to get their phone back. I mean, get mad
Yes.
mad
Yeah.
to get their phone back. Enraged. Well, now that level of frustration of being denied this source of gratification, I have to say, this is not you this is not right. You need this too much.
Mhm.
You got to try to go without it some, because otherwise you're going to become a slave to it.
Mhm.
And I'm being idealistic. I know that first time you said that, it ain't gonna work. They ain't
Mhm.
gonna. But ultimately, you're going to have to be able to communicate that message,
Mhm.
that limit, and that's what our job in as parents in adolescence is, to communicate the expectations, the demands, the limits, knowing that they're going to bounce off of it, but
Mhm.
to have integrity and consistency,
Mhm.
keeping that on the screen.
We have a comment by Jessica. I like what you said, though, to come at it honestly and compassionately and say, you need this too much, instead of what we usually want to do is, I'm going to take this from you, I'm going to stop this, and then, they feel cornered. And what do you do when you feel cornered? But you seem to need this too much.
Mm-hmm.
Jessica says, accepting their reality as their truth is so important, even if we don't agree with it. Meet them where they're at and listen to their pain with your entire being.
Yes. If understanding and acceptance, if we can listen, and that's the key. Because often we come, and as parents, we come in 3 or 4 shades. We are authoritarian. You do it because I say do it. I say this, that's what you do. We're authoritative. We communicate the limits, expectations, and demands, but we are sensitive to our children's vulnerabilities and needs. Or we want to be their friend. And we will bend any way the wind is blowing just to be liked. Or we are off somewhere uninvolved. So we are permissive, wanting to be their friend, or we're uninvolved. All of us somewhere along the way of parenting find ourselves somewhere in one of those 4 buckets, whether we like it or not, depending on what the circumstances are. Some predominantly one way or the other. But it is critical that understanding and acceptance in that space between parent and child is key. It's that understanding and acceptance is just as critical there as it is in the intimate space between partners. Understanding and acceptance. That means I have to listen to you.
So now if they're using a substance and we say, I see that you need this too much, you really can't even say that, because if they're using a substance, especially an illegal one, chances are you don't see it. It's I suspect, or I found, or something. What do we do to support them in those situations?
Support sometimes is tough.
Yeah.
Because we will probably see other signs. We see signs with drop in grades. We see signs of a change in the social network. We see signs in just general appearance, how they look. We see signs in attitude. And ultimately, we see that I always say that there are 3 major responsibilities that we have. Children, adolescents, your academic responsibilities, your interpersonal responsibilities, and then to help you to become a participating citizen, your household responsibilities, jobs that are involved in making the household run. But those 3, you put that up, and that's where your rewards, set up a reward pool, for example. And you have choice about what rewards you want. And you build up the pool, and that's where they come from if you assume those responsibilities. If you see a person just totally ignoring the academic, interpersonal, they are a lot of antagonism, pushing people away, and absolutely no involvement in participating in the household responsibility. Out late at night, getting picked up, catching a charge. You gotta begin thinking about them going away. You've got to remove them from that environment because has become unsafe. Now, that's the difficult situation. But you've got to use your power and influence. Where do you go? Well, some opportunities are the camps.
Okay.
Some are rehab situations. They may need detox, but rehab. I'm a firm believer in putting a person in a situation where they can begin to develop attitudes that will help them to put ideas before the impulse. And that's why I have such a strong belief in 12-step philosophy, because it is a program of life that helps the individual from park bench to Park Avenue, from adolescence to senescence, to put an idea before an impulse. That is the critical aspect of consequential thinking that the adolescent doesn't have. And so the earlier you can begin to introduce them into an environment where limits are set, and then education about consequential thinking and about being honest about their powerlessness in the face of the substance. Stepping back and hearing each other talk about how unmanageable their lives had become academically, at home, interpersonally, and being able to look that reality in the face with honesty in a group setting. So that I think is the best way to support. They will go kicking and screaming. Sometimes you can do it without that extreme if you find groups, intensive outpatient opportunities, group settings. I'm a firm believer in groups, and I'm a firm believer in 12-step oriented groups. Now, there are certain smart recovery. Since people are interested or comfortable online, smart recovery is an important tool to help you to understand how to manage your urges, manage the triggers that prompt you. We talk about people, places, and things. Very difficult to get that across, that you're going to have to change maybe your associates, people, places, and things, because once you see Joe, what gets triggered now, Joe has gotten paired with the high. So your pleasure center is tweaked every time you see Joe. So these are the ways of supporting, I believe, that they're critical. Sometimes you have to just use your influence to remove them from the situation.
So that is very helpful. 12-step groups are an option. You like the groups because not only for the accountability, but to hear other people's experiences, because it's some version of the same.
That's right. It universalizes. I'm not stigmatized. It's not me by myself suffering here. I see other people have struggled with this. And they're at different points. And their parents said the same thing. We all here because we got,
Yeah. So we're going to do this together. We're not alone, which is what we like to tell you here at your team. You are not alone. And the smart recovery, which is very important and new, which helps you manage your urges and your triggers. That's another option of support. We always like to leave people to make sure that they have something that they can take away. So those are two really important things that you can take away if this is something that your family is dealing with, and you feel the need to step in. It's time to step in. no matter what it is that you feel that your teen is addicted to. Obviously, if it's something, if it's a substance such as heroin or something, that you must take a medical approach. Am I correct? Okay.
And a treasure trove of educational material for young people is on NIDA.
What is that?
The National Institute of Drug Abuse. NIDA has a web page specifically for teens.
Okay.
And for parents. And you go on there and you can find anything educational, beautiful discussions with young people talking about that are, good for teachers to provide in the classroom. Young people describing, using their language, because they're all learning to code now. and they talk about the developing brain and why, we don't like to listen to our parents, but here's a good reason why you ought not to use drugs, is because we're still coding our brains. Their brains are not mature. We're coding them. And you have a choice as to how you want to code yours. You can put bad code, drugs mess up the code. And so, they're talking like that. So
we have that link up here. Jessica, who's behind the scenes and makes us better, has already put up the link to the general NIDA, but also the NIDA for teens. So if this is something that interests you, please look in the comment section, and it's already there. The link to those are already up.
Yeah, those are wonderful.
So we're going to leave you with those resources, which are valuable resources. And thank Dr. McCurtis for joining us today. I really appreciate this.
Well, thank you.
This is the first of many important conversations along this line. I think it was a great opener. And we need to do more of this. Tomorrow, I have to change my post, because usually I'm on Tuesday talking about Wednesday, but now on Thursday talking about Friday. Tomorrow is Steph and Sue, who are best friends, and they always have a good topic to talk about. So they're going to be on tomorrow. And I also want to remind our guests that on Tuesday evenings, we are still in the midst of Destination College, our college summit, all about the college process, the application process from beginning to end. So you want to join us on Tuesdays. You need to register for that. Everybody who's registered is automatically entered into our grand raffle. And the prize is courtesy of Sylvan Learning. One person will win a free SAT or ACT course, and that's about a $1,200 value. So that's a significant prize, and that will be announced on April 26th, I believe is our last date. All you have to do to be eligible for that is register for Destination College. If you have not joined us for Destination College and you feel like you shouldn't because you've missed some weeks, don't worry about it, because once you register, you get the recordings of the previous weeks and all of the ones to come. So you'll still have access to all 8 weeks. Thank you. This was very valuable. I feel like I went to a grad school level course. I feel so smart today. I thank you so much for joining us. Bye-bye, everybody.